Thanks for joining us for alcohol and 18 to 25-year-olds. Is this a rite of passage? We'll be talking more about that. And we really want to thank our community partner, the Montgomery County Office of Drug and Alcohol. We have a few guests with us tonight. I'm so grateful to have these folks with us. Liz Ferris is a therapist with Ethos Treatment. She works with adolescents and young adults, among many others. And Ed McCann is here from the District Attorney's Office in Montgomery County. And we have a young person in recovery with us as well. Lewis, thank you so much for being with us to share your personal story. You're welcome to submit your questions using the chat or the Q&A at any time during this program. I will keep an eye on those and make sure that we get to them by the end. And we are recording this program, but your questions will not show up in the recording. We panelists will see them, but you don't have to worry about them showing up in the recording. And you can follow up on tonight's program by visiting this page on our website, conversation.zone/alcohol. I'll put all of these links in the chat that I'm referencing before we finish up tonight, so that you'll be able to look in the chat. That there's also a survey at the end that will come up at the end of this program. Please take a moment to complete that. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps us so much to know what was helpful and what you might like to hear about in the future. I want to let you know about one program that we have coming up that might be of interest. It's on December 7th, and we're calling it Lessons Learned from Colorado. This is part of our Youth Marijuana Prevention Project. This is a 5-year grant. We're in our 4th of those 5 years with Montgomery County once again. And this is really important for us here in Pennsylvania because, as you know, probably, we already have medical marijuana legalized. And there is legislation out there for adult use cannabis to be legalized. And so we really need to understand what other states have gone through, and Colorado certainly was kind of the launching place for this in a lot of ways. So Ben Court is a returning champion of ours. We love him. He is the author of Weed Incorporated, and he's become a true expert on cannabis policy and understanding this. He's a person in recovery. He's also a director of a treatment center in Colorado. So we love hearing from Ben. He's a wealth of information. So I hope you'll join us for that. But you can find out about that program and many others on our calendar. And here's the link for our calendar. I'll share that with you as well. I always like to give a shout out for my friends at Parent Partnership. This is part of our organization. We are parents like myself. I have a son in recovery. That's what brought me into this work. And we need each other. We parents need to talk to each other and understand what's happening to our family, to our child. So some of our meetings are on Zoom these days, but some of us are going back in person. And this calendar on this part of our website shows you all the meetings that are available. The green buttons are Zoom meetings and the purple buttons are in person. We have a couple of hybrid, but you just basically click on these and you'll get information about the meeting, anything that you need to know, contact info for the leaders of the groups and all of that. But we're all just parents of people with a substance use disorder supporting one another. And there's, by the way, no registration. You just show up. So I also want to let you know about something we're so grateful to have running now for almost a year called the Family Recovery Course. This was piloted in Chester County, but now we have partnerships with Chester, Montgomery, and Bucks counties to bring this at no charge to parents in the region who have a loved one. This is not a prevention program. This is for someone who identifies their child as having a substance use disorder. This is a child of any age. We really love to take the time to educate families. It's peer-led, but it is clinically informed. We work with a few local clinicians who helped us with this curriculum. It's a 3-part series. We cap it at 12 participants in each series, and it's just really been wonderful. I encourage you to check this out on our website as well, conversation.zone/FRC for Family Recovery Course. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background information about our topic tonight, just to sort of lay the foundation a bit, and then I'll turn it over to the rest of our panel. But first, just want to take a look at this. Monitoring the Future does a lot of surveying. This is through the University of Michigan, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. And this is a little outdated in that the most recent numbers are from 2017, but I just like how they made this graphic that shows children using alcohol at any point in their lives, by the time they're in 12th grade, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade combined, has been pretty precipitously dropping. So we're doing a good job, I think, of getting out the word about, kids, it's just not a good idea to be binge drinking or underage drinking at all, or certainly not drinking and driving. And we know especially those riskier behaviors with alcohol have definitely gone down. So that's really good news. But you can see the young adult population that we're focusing on tonight. We're looking at 18 and to 25, 18 to 50, to 30, something in there. But basically, really hasn't come down the way we would like. So this is just looking at use over their lifetime. And it's really important to note that for any of us, when we had big transitions in our young lives, that's when we were most vulnerable. So big changes when we're really young, going from grade school to middle school to high school, and so on. But probably the biggest transition any of us experience is turning 18, possibly leaving the home, possibly going off to college, possibly relocating in some way, feeling like we can do anything we want because we're adults. I don't know too many adults who can do anything they want, but that's the perception that a lot of young people have. And so they're greatly at risk. And so it's important to be aware of that, especially assuming we usually have a lot of family members with us. And so it's just important to note. And if you look at this, this is coming from SAMHSA, which looks at substance abuse, mental health, and this is the Service Association. So the gray area here is everyone underage, under the legal age of drinking, which is 21. So you can see that there's a huge jump when you go from the 16 to 17-year-olds to the 18 to 20-year-olds, not just in their current alcohol use, but in heavy alcohol use. I know these numbers look small, but that's a pretty impressive jump up there to heavy alcohol use before you're even the age that's legal to drink. And then you can see how it really shoots up once you become 21 and it is legal to drink. This was looking at data from 2020 by these age groups. And alcohol use doesn't really come down too much. Heavy alcohol use doesn't come down nearly enough, but it does definitely spike up in that first year of legal use. This Jelinek curve has been around for quite a while. It's something that is very basic information for people who are trying to understand the science of addiction. And the reason I like to point it out with alcohol use in particular is alcohol is just different than a lot of other substances. I think people don't even think of it as a substance, but it is. It is a drug, actually. It is mood altering. And so we have to look at progression because especially with alcohol, it is so accepted. It is so not only accepted, but glorified and celebrated, and it's just ubiquitous. It's associated with sporting events and celebrations and milestones and all that sort of thing. So where do we cross the line? I'm just talking with a panelist before this about this point of where have I gone from use, like first experimentation, to regular use, to moderate, to maybe a little heavier, to okay, I'm having a really rough time. It's, my job, I just lost my job, or my marriage is falling apart, or I just relocated and I'm feeling disconnected, or there are all kinds of things that if we've already got something in place that we're using that helps take the edge off, so to speak, are we using it a little too much now? Where do we cross that line? So I think it's just important to think about progression, and often the person who is using the substance, in this case alcohol, just can't see it. Sometimes it's the loved ones around them who might see it much more readily than the person who's actually using it. So this kind of new normal develops, and we don't always become aware of it, in ourselves. COVID didn't help us in this world at all when we talk about alcohol use and other substance use too, but alcohol consumption increased for 60% of people who were consuming alcohol. Roughly 27% didn't have any change, and there was even a decrease in 13%. But my goodness, this is disconcerting. We know that sales went up, especially in 2020 when everybody was super isolated. You would think sales might have gone down when you look at the overall industry because we weren't in restaurants and bars, but we were buying it. We were able to get our hands on it. So lots of drinking increased over those early days, especially. These numbers were from 2021, looking at substance use. Again, this came from monitoring the future of looking at young adults. In this case, they were targeting data from 19 to 30-year-olds. So in the past year, 81%, almost 82% of young adults drank at all, any amount. In past month, the reason you break that down, you just want to look at more frequency. So past month, 66% drank in the past month. Those two numbers were actually down from preceding years. 13%, however, of young adults were drinking excessively. So the way Monitoring the Future classifies this is binge drinking is considered 5 drinks in a row. Excessive drinking is considered 10 drinks in a row. That number rose the most that it had since they were collecting this data since 2005. So that's excessive drinking in the past 2 weeks. So that's a really disconcerting number that we see in young adult population. So if you are a parent, there are some things you can do. You might think that, oh, I don't have any control. They're over 18. What can I do? There are actually plenty of things that we can continue to do. Our kids would never admit this, and we might not believe it, but we are still the most important messenger in their lives. So we can have really clear boundaries about the use in our home. I know that way back a million years ago when I was in high school, every graduation party I went to, the parents were condoning the use. We had kegs, we had bottles of wine, and everybody seemed to know about it. And it was like this rite of passage. And no, not okay. The drinking age is 21. This is not legal. And also wish kind of in a way that our drinking age was 25, which is when that prefrontal cortex is fully developed, because our brains are still quite vulnerable to substance use disorder when we begin using before that brain fully forms. So really important to still hold those boundaries, over 18 until they're at least 21. Eating together when possible. This is still, I know it's an old one, but a goodie. It really is important that we connect and keep lines of communication open, talking about it even after they're 21, especially making it kind of normalizing the conversation so that it doesn't feel like a taboo subject. A lot of times we get into the elephant in the room kind of conversations. If we can keep it open, hopefully we won't have that sort of taboo feeling around it. Being really transparent and thoughtful about our family history. And I say thoughtful because if we have family members who are struggling with alcoholism, if we're speaking about them in a really negative way, that does not really impart really great conversation. Like, it doesn't welcome the conversation because we're already sounding judgmental about somebody who's struggling with their alcohol use. So we want to be very transparent about the fact that there is alcohol use in the family, it might be problematic, but also to not be demonizing it so that our loved ones will feel comfortable talking to us about any concerns that they have. When they express thoughts that they have about alcohol use, if we can be respectful of those we're listening to, that's really important too, because when we get that look on our face, like, are you crazy? That sort of shuts down the conversation. So we want to have respectful dialogue. And if we hear something that we know to be incorrect, let them know. Actually, I have some information to the contrary. I think this is basically social norms, but I think this is so interesting. Princeton University did this study about pluralistic ignorance, which is basically the incorrect belief that your attitudes are different from the majority's because you're thinking this way. And what Princeton did was they asked their students about some new policies that were in place that were meant to limit alcohol use among students. And they asked students what their feelings were, and most students were in support of the limitations. And they asked, what do you think your fellow classmates feel about this? And a lot of them said, oh, my classmates aren't going to like this at all. They want to drink. So there's always, it seems to be this conflict between what the perception is and what the reality is. So if everybody's saying, I'm all for more restrictions, but nobody else is, that just doesn't make sense, right? But we have perception drives behavior. So if we believe this is acceptable, we're going to kind of go along with it. So I just think that's an interesting concept. Just a little bit about alcohol use disorder. It's very much a similar definition to addiction, which my favorite definition for addiction is continued use despite negative consequences, continued behaviors despite negative consequences. So yeah, all these things that might go wrong with your when you're using alcohol, if you're continuing to use, then you might be crossing that line into alcoholism or alcohol use disorder. Again, drinking at an early age definitely puts us at greater risk. Family members, genetics is also a really important thing. Here we have roughly 60% of our risk for developing alcohol use disorder has to do with family history or genetics. And even watching our parents' behavior, you know, being in that environment where it's condoned, where it's the second the adult friends walk in the house, you know, hey, can I get you a drink? You know, if we're hearing that when we're growing up, then we're kind of primed to think this is absolutely essential to socializing. So we want to be thoughtful about that language. Mental health conditions like depression, anxiety, PTSD, trauma, these sorts of things definitely contribute to risk factors for alcoholism. Childhood trauma especially elevates that risk. The DSM, the diagnostic, what does DSM stand for? Lizzie will know. Liz will know. Anyway, the DSM has their criteria for alcohol use disorder, and we have that on our follow-up page that I mentioned. So if you're interested in seeing this, that handout is there. It's sort of just a checklist, and you can rate yourself or a loved one. It's very helpful. There are medications available to treat alcohol use disorder. Naltrexone, which is an oral or injectable. Acamprosate is known as Camprol. That's something you can get a prescription for, and disulfiram is antabuse. These are all medications that are non-addictive and can be used to help with the craving for alcohol, but certainly all kinds of talk therapy, and you're going to hear from somebody tonight who's a talk therapist, and so really, really helpful to get that kind of support. And big fans here. It'd be a part of the conversation of 12-step programs. So Alcoholics Anonymous been around since 1935. If it's doing amazing things for millions of people every year. So buck in a basket, it's very low cost. So it's online these days. You can find a meeting just about anywhere, locally or virtually. So important to help with the risk of relapse, which we had an advanced question about. I'm glad that question came up. That's another layer. So if we have identified that we have some of these risk factors like depression, anxiety, and other things, we need to layer up our support. So therapy, 12-step programs, medication, whatever might be helpful. This is such an important thing to treat appropriately. It's very important to note that of all the substances that are available to us, whether they're legal or illegal, the two that are most deadly to detox from, which means to, like, if you're using them heavily and you stop suddenly, alcohol or benzodiazepines are the two that are the most risky to detox from. So you really need medical attention when you're planning to stop if you're using heavily. This can absolutely put your life at risk for a lot of problems. So very, very important to keep that in mind. That is all that I have. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm really happy to introduce you to Ed McCann. And Ed, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and giving a little bit of your background, I'd appreciate it.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Kim, thanks for having me again. My name is Ed McCann. I'm the first assistant district attorney in Montgomery County. I've been a prosecutor for a really long time. I was in Philadelphia for 26 years before I came to Montgomery County. I've been here for almost 7 years now. So I don't come here tonight trying to give some heavy-handed message. I also am a parent. My 3 kids are in their 20s now, so I went through a lot of the things that Kim is talking about just navigating that whole world of high school students and then young adults and dealing with alcohol. So just going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that we see and some of the issues that your loved ones could potentially face in terms of drinking underage, and some of the things you could face if you host a party at your house with alcohol with underage kids. So just have a few slides here. So I just want to talk a second about this because this is something that we see quite frequently, where alcohol intersects with sexual assault, and that definitely happens in the realm that Kim was talking about, 18 and over in college, way more often. It certainly increases at that age. Early age of onset of drinking and frequency of alcohol consumption is directly tied to greater risk of incapacitated sexual assault. And this statistic, sexual assault is obviously underreported. There's been a lot of studies on this, but certainly it's been pretty consistently shown that about 50% of sexual assault among college students is associated with alcohol consumption by the perpetrator or the victim. So first thing, a lot of people say, well, underage drinking is just a citation. There's really not that many consequences, and that's not really accurate. You can get in some significant trouble, not just from drinking underage, but the other things that go along with it. See a lot of young people using fake identifications, making fake IDs, buying fake IDs, buying or trying to buy alcohol under the age of 21, asking someone to do it, and then for the parents, really the selling or giving alcohol to a minor is the biggest issue. So the legal consequences for underage drinking, it's up to a $500 fine for the first violation, and then up to $1,000 for the second and subsequent offenses. And these are not automatically expunged, even if the person is under 18. Expungement means dismiss, after the case is over, that the record would be clean. It's not automatically done. There's other issues that can happen too. Public drunkenness and misconduct, disorderly conduct, which can go up to even a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree. And certainly carrying a false identification card can be a misdemeanor of the 3rd degree. Meaning that, in some jurisdictions, that's not just a citation, that would be something that somebody would be fingerprinted and photographed for. Summary offenses don't usually result in jail, but they can result in probation, and they can result in fines. And 3rd degree misdemeanors can be up to a $5,000 fine. Again, they don't usually come with jail time, but they could come with jail time. And certainly it comes with having a record, which is obviously can be an impairment for people in terms of the job market. So this is a question that actually we got before in the chat before about it. Basically, this whole notion of whether it's okay if the parent is at home and the kids are drinking in the house and they're not going to drive, those types of things, holding on to their keys. There's all kinds of issues with that legally, but let me just talk about the sort of the practical issues first. A lot of times that's the hope, that, well, I'll take their keys and no one will go anywhere, and they'll just be in one part of my house and nothing's going to happen. But we've seen, even in Montgomery County recently, that's not what always happens. We had a case last spring during graduation time where a mom said that had a lot of kids at her home from a local high school. Police were called. There were kids outside getting sick. There were kids everywhere. And several kids had to be hospitalized. And that mother got charged with furnishing alcohol to minors. And that's a situation where now she has to hire a lawyer. She's probably not going to be offered any kind of diversion. And that's a pretty serious consequence for her. So you can think in your mind that everything will be under control, but kids find a way a lot of times in these situations to get out of control. This is a particular case that happened in New Jersey, but there could be certainly consequences for you if you host these kind of parties. Penalties can be thousands of dollars in fines. It's going to cost you money to hire a lawyer and go through the criminal justice system. If this happens and you get arrested, even if the case ends up getting into a diversion program, it's still going to cost you money to hire a lawyer and deal with all the issues that you have to deal with in the criminal justice system for a charge like this. So it is a misdemeanor of the third degree. There's a mandatory fine of $1,000 on the first violation, $2,500 on subsequent violations. And this is the tragedy that can happen, that it has happened. And that is, if you host a party like this, and God forbid somebody goes out and drives and someone gets hurt, that can be, you can be responsible for what occurs at that, in terms of the deaths, in terms of an involuntary manslaughter charge, and that has happened in Pennsylvania. There was a case not that long ago where a parent had a party in her home attended by teenagers, and 3 died in a drunk driving accident after leaving the party, and the parent ended up being convicted and sentenced to state prison for having that party at their house. And the court said in the case Commonwealth versus McCluskey, and this really does make common sense to all of us, I'm sure, the furnishing of alcohol to minors started the chain of causation that led to the death of 3 teenagers. That teenagers, alcohol, and automobiles can be, and often is, a fatal combination is not a novel concept. So it's really not anything that you all don't understand, but there can be. The reason why I bring these cases up and talk about them is because there have been real life consequences in some of these situations, and a court and a prosecutor's office is going to say it's foreseeable in these circumstances when you have the mix of alcohol served in homes with teenagers there. So it can be something that can lead to some really serious consequences. And it's not something that a lot of times, even if you think you can have it under control, that it does. A lot of times we see these situations where the young person is only going to have a few people there, and it ends up more people come that the parent might not know about. But these situations tend to spiral out of control, and they can cause a lot of problems. So it's really not advisable at all to have a home where kids feel like that they can come to your house and do the drinking at your house, because you could be yourself with some serious potential criminal liability and certainly civil liability as well if something happens to one of the kids that come to your home as a result of drinking alcohol at the party at your house. So that's all I have for the slides, and that's my presentation at this point.
Thank you, Ed. Appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much. Liz, are you ready to go there, my friend? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hey everyone, I'm Liz Ferris. I am an adolescent therapist. I work with like 7th grade to seniors in high school. I do IOP, so intensive outpatient group therapy 3 times a week, as well as individual therapy. I also run a family group once a week to touch base with a lot of the things that are being asked and talked about tonight. And then I also run a college sober living house. So it's a co-ed sober living house down by Drexel and Penn University for kids that are actively sober, have gone through treatment, are trying to reacclimate into a college campus experience in a safe way. So there's a lot of different angles that I work with this population in. So I'm going to just like run through some things that I had written down that I usually talk about when I do this with you guys. And then anything that I missed or anything that you want me to clarify, just drop it in the box and I'll do my best to clarify as I go. Some of this will be repetitive. I joke around with Kim that like I need to start putting slides together with everybody else, but she covers so much of the basics that I would go over too. Like the bottom line is looking at, genetics and environmental factors, right? Like from the beginning, kids that are more susceptible based on our genetic coding, right? So letting them know early on that this is potentially something that they are more prone to, and being able to have honest conversations about it, right? Like I work with families that deal with this stuff in like such a wide spectrum where they either want to like shield their kid from like absolutely everything and like not tell them anything to telling them like way too much, right? And so being able to kind of like work with your partner, your family members to kind of strike this balance where we can be open and honest, and also serious and hold boundaries, right? And when I talk about boundaries and rules in a family, it doesn't matter necessarily what they are as much as because it's different for every family, but that they are consistent, right? It has to be something that you and your family are going to be able to adhere to, right? So if it's, if you get caught drinking, I'm not giving you any extra cash for next semester. Or if you get caught drinking, I'm not paying for school next semester, right? Like whatever it is, you just have to be able to hold that line, or the consequences and boundaries don't really hold any weight because kids then just learn that those words don't really mean anything. And then just going off of some of the statistics that Kim said, I feel like I'm definitely seeing the same things with my high school kids. I feel like historically, like drinking had kind of always been the dominant thing that high school kids were experimenting with. But in the last like 7-8 years with carts and dab pens and being able to zero it out where you can't smell pot anymore, kids are now getting easier access to marijuana than they are alcohol. We couldn't like smoke a joint in high school like 10 years ago, right? But these kids can have this on them all the time. So the access to it is exponentially higher than alcohol is. So the idea that like those numbers are like a little lower with alcohol with this age group kind of makes sense. And then when they get into high school, right, or when they get into college, the introduction like skyrockets, right? It's like we have a fantasy of what college is like, there's this belief that that's what everybody's doing, right? And the statistics show that it is not what everybody's doing, right? Like in high school, the percentage of kids that have experimented or have drank a certain amount is much lower than when you ask other kids what they think it might be. And so, like Kim said, right, like the brain is still developing. So even when we're getting into college, we need to be aware of that. It's, the idea that like when a kid's brain is kind of like the gas pedal is there, right? And like the brake isn't. So it's like they have a lot of really high risk behavior. And the earlier on that they are exposed to substances, the harder it's going to be to develop that brake pedal, right? So like some of the questions are, what if some parents like let their kids drink, or can they drink at my house? The fact is that the earlier kids are exposed to substances, the higher the likelihood of addiction is. Also, like parents are being bullied by your kids, right? Like I hear it all the time, right? It's like kids are coming, like you parents are coming in and being like, well, like all of these parents are doing this, or this parent is doing this, and I should like, my kid gives me a hard time because X, Y, and Z. And the reality is that that's not what all parents are doing, right? And you guys have to be able to come together as a family and set really strong rules. There also has to be the ability for open conversation, right? Kids need to be able to feel like they can come to us to tell us what's going on. When it's like a zero tolerance, really harsh penalty, that's when kids start to get sneaky, right? That's when kids start to get really secretive and kind of go out a little bit harder than they necessarily would if it could be a little bit more of an open conversation. And so then, so it's like setting clear boundaries, right? Not budging on it. Family rituals, right? Like how Kim's talking about having family dinners, that can be anything, right? Like if it's like watching the same TV show every weekend, like the example I use is my mom always was watching American Idol when I was like coming home really drunk. And I was like always an invitation where like I could I could sit and join and participate with my family in this thing once a week. And like most of the times I didn't, but like sometimes I did. And it was just this kind of like regular routine where like we knew that there was that space where everyone would be home. And if there was something that needed to be discussed, like we could have that time. So even just setting up like something fun that you guys do regularly. And then also times where, okay, like Tuesday night dinner is when we're going to have the harder conversations, right? So kids aren't just constantly expecting, like, mom's going to ask me if I did my homework, mom's going to check Power School or ask if my college applications are in or whatever stressors there might be, where it's like we can kind of have a clear understanding so that that helps to build routine for you and your family, right? Because if not, then everybody starts to get on edge. You guys get on edge, they get on edge, and then communication breaks down. And so then, yeah, like going into this transition into college, right? Kids are now on their own, right? Genetic factors, environmental factors. Environmental factors growing up until about 14, you guys are the primary, right? You guys are their heroes. You guys are right. You guys know everything. And then they get into high school and then they start to learn from their peers, right? They start to kind of get a little bit more freedom. And then when they get into college, there's this whole world where they still don't really have any power in it, but they have all of this knowledge and it kind of, they battle with that. So when Kim's saying everybody comes home and you guys are the primary 100%, and also they're not learning from you guys anymore. So there's all of this transitioning happening for them where they're trying to relearn and figure out who they are and compare with fantasy versus reality of who they are and what they need and what they think everyone else is doing. And so I work specifically a lot with like this failure to launch population. And a lot of the times what I'm really assessing for is like emotional intelligence and where they are able to cope. A lot of times, again, right, the younger kids are being exposed to marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, whatever else. They are losing the need to learn any other skills to deal with life as it comes. And so they start to get paralyzed, right, because they're not able to see the world the way that like an 18 or a 25-year-old would, right? It's like they're kind of still reverting to the same behaviors and characteristics that they would as a younger kid because they didn't really have to learn other skills. So we look at like the like spectrum of like use, like to like experimentation, use, abuse, addiction, and then also how we can pad some skills in there. There's a lot of really phenomenal college programs out there that work specifically to help kids transition back into college. And then also once kids are back in college, like I talked about the house by Drexel, there's also another house in Westchester, and there's a lot of different programs like across the country that we can definitely help plug you guys in with if that's something that you guys are looking for. And then the last thing that I'll just say is like, you guys also need to just take care of yourselves, right? It's really hard to be dealing with kids that are struggling with addiction, or just like abuse. There's not a lot of control there, right? And so we have to be able to you guys need to take care of yourselves. Al-Anon, your own therapy, self-care, and then coming together to set those boundaries where your kid might wander for a bit, but if you hold that strong line, they will be able to come back when they are ready, and then we can like pick them up and go from there. So that's kind of a gist of what I have. So I'll pass it back to Kim, but I'm happy to answer anything else that I can.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz. I've written down a couple of questions. I'll follow up with you later, but I want to turn it over to Lewis now. Lewis, thank you so much for being here. So we love having people with us who are in recovery and are willing to share their personal stories. It's just always so meaningful, and it really helps to, we can show all the graphs and data in the world, but it's humanizing it and really understanding this on a person to person level. It's really important. So I'm very grateful to you for being here. So take it away, Lewis.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you for having me. I've been a fan of Kim's organization, of being a part of the conversation for a long time, and love supporting the work that they do. This is my first time on a panel, which is just funny because you'll hear my story, and I wish that my parents and I were sitting on this panel 10, 15 years ago, because we really could have used it. My name is Louis DeSanto. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I got sober July 1st, 2019. I did about 90 days in a residential treatment facility in Florida, July through October 2019, when I was 26 years old. I really enjoy getting to do this for two reasons, sharing my story, that is. And the first is, when I made the call for help, I was pretty disappointed, not in the lack of resources, but the lack of knowledge I had, my family had, and my inner circle had about what resources were out there. I knew the name of one treatment facility, and I specifically called my father and said, "Hey, Dad, I need to go to this place." And that's all we knew. Come to find out, of all the beautiful organizations like this one that exists. So I really made it my passion, and now it's actually my job, full-time job, is to provide resources in the community, particularly young people, because the other reason I love doing this is you'll find that my story is not one where life came to a screeching halt after legal battles or financial trouble or something like that. It was really a long battle with internal pain, of stuff that I never dealt with. But luckily for me, I was able to reach out for help and get the help I needed before one of those life-altering events happened to me. And I think it's important to share those stories as well, to give people, you don't have to wait until that very severe, on the surface, rock bottom, before reaching out for help. So to start with how I got here, I guess, briefly, growing up, I had a fine childhood. I was very active, played sports all throughout the year, had some great friends in the community. And my family was great. I had two younger siblings, and my parents. We all lived in Delaware County, and things were great. When I was in second grade, I faced a lot of bullying at school. You can't see because we're on Zoom, but I'm a very small person, or I was. I gained a little bit of it, but I'm short and was, a prime target for bullies in grade school. So much so that I actually had to switch schools. So going into third grade, I had to switch schools, and basically what that entailed, and I'll touch more on it later, is like every single day in the recess yard, there were physical altercations. And I was so scared to report it. I don't remember it too much, but, my mom tells me I called from the nurse's office every single day with a different ailment that was not the actual problem. Like, not like, hey, my elbow hurts because I got beat up, but like, I have a headache, my asthma's bad, something to disguise what was actually happening, but me just wanting to get out of there. And, come to find out later on through all the work I've done in my recovery, that actually played a huge impact on my life at that time. So fast forward to high school. I went to Radnor High School. I had gone to private school up until that point. So public school was a bit of a culture shock for me. There's a lot of freedom. And I started drinking. I think I had my first drink in 8th grade. And to be honest, I don't really remember the time where it shifted from like sneaking, something from my parents' liquor cabinet to like partying. I actually don't know where I ended up crossing that line, but what I do know is that I drank every single weekend in high school, as well as so did all of my friends. When I was a sophomore, my parents got divorced. So what that meant was that we switched houses every week. When I was at dad's house, mom was not home. I don't know where she was, but she was not home. And I was with mom, dad was not home. So that meant we had an open house every single weekend. So I hosted parties, and I'm not kidding when I say every single weekend in high school. Same group of friends. There's a core group of 12 of us. People from different grades would end up coming eventually, but it was like clockwork. Every Friday after school, we picked up 8 cases of beer, a liter of vodka, and whatever else, and we would finish it. And just thinking about that now, as you know, I was 16, 12 of us were drinking 4 cases of beer. Like, it's insane. So that continued all through high school without any consequence. We never had a party busted. We never had anyone to get in trouble. So there was really nothing that made me stop. All that being said, I was a terrible high school student. I did the very bare minimum to graduate. I think at the end of high school graduation, I was waiting on a math grade to figure out if I could actually graduate or not. The same ended up being true for college, but the reason that's relevant is because I didn't get into any of colleges I applied to. So what I did, I had a bunch of friends from the grade ahead of me that were at Penn State Altoona, and they lived off campus. So I found this small Catholic school called Mount Aloysius that has about 900 students. They took me there, but I lived with all my friends at Penn State Altoona, so I just chased the party. I had no interest in the academic work, and as a matter of fact, I applied to transfer to Shippensburg during my first semester. I got in right around Thanksgiving for the following year. So my second semester freshman year, I was enrolled in classes, but I never went. And I drank every single day, every single night. Just continued to party again with zero consequence. I got to Shippensburg. I joined a fraternity. Eventually became president of that fraternity. And when I look back on it, you know, we all know about stereotypical, whatever you think about a fraternity is basically what was happening. We drank most nights of the week, but I very quickly went from someone who was attending the party to someone who was starting the party. And what I mean by that is, like, you know, sure, a lot of college kids go out and drink on a Thursday night. Most college kids, if they are going out to drink on a Thursday night, start at 8. I was calling my buddies after my 11 o'clock class asking to go to the liquor store. It didn't seem like anything was wrong with that at the time, but looking back, like, it was always me. I was always starting the party. And when my friends did not want to engage, like, I would give them hell for it. Why don't you want to party with me? Like, we're fine. And eventually became president of the fraternity. And if I'm being honest, I think all that did for me was, like, make it normal for me to be the instigator of all these things. Because I could schedule the mixers with sororities and the parties, and I could schedule it on a Tuesday and no one said anything, because why not? I was in charge. And then I finally hit my first sort of consequence due to drinking when I was in college. I was a broadcast journalism major, and I was the news anchor for our news station. We aired on campus, but we were also on Comcast cable in the surrounding area of Shippensburg. And they were on Thursday nights, and I had to be there at 6 o'clock. But I always drank beforehand. And I got away with it for about a year. Then one Friday morning, the advisor called me to her office with the news director. She asked if I'd been drinking the night before. And of course, I lied and said no. And then she gave me one more chance, and I said no again. And she already had a recording queued up, and she hit play. And I'm literally stuttering my own name. And it's actually really hard. I thankfully got her to take it down on YouTube, but it was really hard to watch struggling to say my own name. So, of course, after I continue the lie, oh, no, I didn't drink beforehand. I was just up really the night before, and I didn't go to sleep till 5 a.m., so I was still hungover, like total load of crap. And I got suspended. One, because there's a college campus and you can't do that, but also because we're on cable and FCC regulations state that you cannot be on air delivering news drunk. So that was the first, consequence, although not a major one. But that didn't happen. If I started when I was drinking 14, that happened at 22. I mean, that's a long period of time without any repercussions. So I graduate college and I accept a job in Westchester, and I get a place of my own. It was a decent job. I had some money in my pocket, and that's when things started to go downhill. And I really started to trend towards the bottom. So it started, I would have a couple of beers every night after work because I had my own place, and I thought that's what you do, which probably has to do with how I grew up. Liz and everyone touched on that a little bit, but it was norm, right? Like, come on, kick your shoes off, turn on the news, and have a couple beers. Eventually, the couple beers didn't become enough, so I was getting the little pints of vodka that they sell behind the counter at the liquor store. So not only was I drinking at night, then at this point, like, to get over the hangover or continue the party, however you want to look at it, I was also drinking before I left for work in the morning. Eventually the pint didn't become enough and I was getting bottles. Eventually the bottle wasn't enough and I was getting handles. I also, depending on how many recovering alcoholics you've heard speak, you may have heard this before, but there are 4 liquor stores in the 10-mile radius of Westchester, and only an alcoholic would know that. And I used to hit a different one every day, because God forbid the liquor store clerk call me out on being there the day before. And when I started to do that, that was the first time in my mind where I didn't say I had a problem, but I was like, this is probably getting a little excessive. And I did that for about a year and a half in Westchester until I lost my job. They didn't say I lost my job because I was drinking, but even if that wasn't the case, my drinking definitely, my performance at work was very poor. I just didn't really care. I stopped caring about anything. So then I went to work with my father, which is a whole nother ball of wax that I still talk to counselors about. But what that meant was I had my own office, and eventually I was running the company. And that's when I started drinking all day, every day. Again, it was kind of the same trend where I started having a couple beers at lunch. Then I started bringing beers in my briefcase, airplane bottles, pints, bottles. And I got to the point where I was drinking a full handle of Jaeger every single day. It's kind of hard to look back on that, to be honest. It was just such a rough point in my life that is all I cared about. All I cared about was getting to the liquor store and making sure I had enough alcohol, as if like my life depended on it. And I guess maybe it did. I finally got to the point where I had gone to my girl, I guess she was my ex-girlfriend at the time. She's now my wife, by the way, but at the time, she was an ex, and we started to secretly talk because we did not want our parents to know we were talking again, because our relationship was so poor. I had kicked her out of 3 apartments that we lived in. Just a very toxic, terrible relationship in which I blamed everything on her. Nothing was ever my fault. So while we were there one night, she was sleeping and I picked up her phone. And I have no idea. I think what I saw was a text message from her to her friend talking about me, nice things. But in my crazy drunk mind, she was talking about another guy, and I lose my mind. I kick down a bathroom door. I kick open a bedroom door. The police come 3 times. And then I just broke down to her and I explained every single, how often I was drinking, how much I hated life, how much internal pain I was going through. And just how life just really became a mess and every day was a struggle. And then that night is when I called my dad, and the next day I was on a flight down to Florida for treatment. While I was at treatment, and still to this day, with all the work that I've done, I found out a lot of things about me and the journey. One thing I'll say is that in my experience, there's certain folks so my home group for AA is a meeting on Friday night at 8:00. And for some people, going to that meeting is important to them because otherwise they will go to the bar. For me, I can be around alcohol without triggers. For me, it's a lot more mental. And as long as I continue to do my therapy, I'm in a good space, because what I've realized is that from the bullying and when my parents got divorced, I never, I guess, found myself, and I was never comfortable in my own skin. And I had no one to talk to about it. From what I can remember in high school, I was constantly playing like video games, sports video games, like Madden, and not even actually playing the games, but using the creation zone to create players and create teams and stadium and create this fantasy world. Because not that I hated the world I was in, I just didn't know who I was. When my parents split, I can quite honestly tell you, I do not remember anyone ever asking if I was okay. I don't remember asking anyone how I was dealing with it. And so what that taught me was to internalize all my feelings. So I had no one to talk to about not knowing who I was, and no one to talk to about being depressed or having anxiety or all of these things that I found out at 26 when I finally went to treatment. And, I mentioned at the beginning of this that I wish we had this webinar when I was younger, because a lot of times when my parents know this, I say it to them. I just wish someone asked me if I was okay. And I think had that happened, I don't know that it would have made me an alcoholic or not an alcoholic. But at least it would have opened the door for me to kind of explore myself and talk to someone else about it, instead of just being drunk all the time, because when I'm drunk, I can control every scenario, at least in my brain. So it's been almost 3.5 years in recovery. I regularly attend AA. I have a sponsor, and I just got a new sponsor to go through the steps again. I sponsor a guy who's new in recovery, which is amazing and a blessing to help someone else. I've gotten married to that same person that I kicked out of multiple apartments. She stayed with me through the entire thing. We got married in September. We have a son. I have another baby on the way in February. And I'm actually working for a treatment center in Maryland now, all because of that one night that I finally reached out for help. And if I could, particularly for this webinar, if I could say anything, my parents it was the norm to drink. I was never getting in trouble. I don't know what a boundary is. I'm still trying to figure out that definition, and they definitely don't know what it is either. But I don't wish that my parents were strict, because I saw some guys who had strict parents that ended up in this situation too. But I just wish I had someone that showed me they cared, and someone who opened the door for conversation, because I think not having that played a huge part to where I got. But things get better, and if you continue to do the work and you catch it and you get yourself into treatment. I have a great relationship with my parents now, my entire family, all of my friends. I have friends that reach out to me now and ask how to get into the program, and it's really a blessing, just to be able to help people. And it's been a blessing to be able to share my story with all of you. And if it's okay with Kim, I'll put my personal phone number in the chat. And if anyone ever has any questions, or maybe your child or someone who could connect with someone like me, I am always open. I really mean that. So thank you so much for listening.
I'm feeling a little choked up there, Lewis. That was amazing. I mean, what a gift you are. And the fact that you had a lot of years of use, you had a lot of years of alcohol use. And I just am blown away by your resilience and your graciousness going forward with this the service that I know that you do, and that you chose to be in this field. Anyway, I'm just thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kim.
We have a couple of I have so many questions, but I want to get to some of our questions. So we did have a couple of questions that came in ahead of time. One was about, and I know that Liz touched on this, we all kind of touched on a little bit, but teens' perception that it's okay to drink. Teens will say like, well, we won't drive, and I don't hear this just from teens, I hear it from a lot of parents too, like, well, we'll take their keys, or we'll make sure the other parents know, and that kind of thing. The cops don't care. I'm sure that Ed might dispute that one. But these are things that, our kids might say to us, or that we might tell ourselves that it's okay. So how do we address that with young people who, and I think, Liz, this comes up so often, where when we talk to our teens, young adults, we want to set clear expectations that it's just not okay. I don't care what the rest of the world is doing. It's just not okay. If we're drawing that really hard line, yet we want transparency,
Mm-hmm.
are they going to say to us, well, actually, we have been drinking a lot these days? You know what I mean? Like, how do you balance that?
I love this question, right? Because it does, like, when I try to explain it, makes no sense, right? Because it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. So I'm a big believer in quick consequence, quick reward, right? So it's like, if there's something that having a clear understanding, right? Like, if you drink and drive, you don't get the car for 2, you know what I mean? Whatever it might be. So that kids learn what those rules are. At the same time, I think that there's something that's really important about having an amnesty rule or something like that, right? Where it's your kid can come to you and talk to you about what's going on. And when they're coming and talking to you about their feelings, something that they're struggling with, something that's really scary for them to be vulnerable about and come to you with, that we're not punishing, right? So for example, right, Drexel University, all the universities here have very different views on substance use on campus, right? St. Joseph's is a Jesuit school, it used to be University of Sciences. They were really good at catching it, but they weren't really good at taking care of the kids. And Drexel has a zero tolerance policy, right? Which is something that we've been working with them about for years, because what happens is kids get into trouble and then they don't call for help because they're scared that they're going to lose their scholarship, or they're scared that they're going to get in trouble. And if this is something that my fraternity brother can just sleep off, I'm not going to jeopardize my scholarship and his scholarship, right? And then kids get really hurt, right? So there's 100% a difference between, we want to set rules in this house, and if my kid is in trouble or needs something, I'm going to be here to help them figure this out together. Does that make sense? It's kind of a clarifying, because what Lewis is saying, right? It's the substance use piece, right? There's 100% an experimental piece to it, right? You guys are going to set rules. Your kids are going to break those rules, right? That's why rules exist, right? So that these kids can start to learn okay, if I break this rule, it's all right. But if I break this rule, then this isn't okay, right? And it's they're learning how to exist in society. But when substance use changes from experimentation to abuse, right? That's not that's not them like just not listening to you, right? Like that's not them just trying to like break the rules and like tell you to like, like kick rocks, right? It's like there is something else going on that is deeper than that, right? So like self-harm, eating disorder, substance use, like shoplifting, like all these different things that, like kind of feel like whack-a-mole. And then like parents are like, well, when I like don't let them do this, then they do that. And like when they do this, they do that, right? Like all of that is just symptoms of like your kid trying to figure out how to regulate themselves and like the body of somebody who is completely dysregulated and will be until they're 25, right? So like we have to set parameters for them, but also understanding, right? Like where Lewis is like, I just wanted someone to make sure I was okay, right? Like I came from the like very strict family, right? And like I broke all the rules, right? And like there was like no one to talk to about what was going on. So it was like I had all the consequences, but like at the end of the day, it was like I was in so much pain, I didn't care about the consequences. I just kept going. And so that's kind of like the line that you guys have to find, which is tricky, which is why there's always support, because you guys need each other to figure that out, because it will look different for every family.
It's so true. I was thinking that as Lewis was sharing that, I know that parents like me, because I also have a son who's been down this road, and it's like, so does that mean that I didn't ask enough questions, that I didn't, so everybody is so different, I mean, I've asked my son 100 times, like, what could we have done? What did we miss? What, and he's like, it's just, this was working for me until it didn't work anymore, and I think, Lewis, to your point, you needed consequences. You needed something to go wrong. In our case, our son didn't have any big I mean, he had things happen, but nothing life shattering. Thank God. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand to watch him, leaving us, basically like just being a shell of himself. And it was just too much and we couldn't take it anymore. We did an intervention. He didn't say, I need help. He was fine to keep on going. So it's just so different in every situation. But I think that curiosity, like when we recognize that our loved one is going through this, to say, please, you're valuable, your life could be better than this, it's, I don't like seeing where your life is going, but anyway, I don't want to go too deeply into that, but we also have another question about relapse or return to use. So after someone has been to treatment, and they, and I've heard this from people before, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have too. I went to treatment. I get it. I went way out of control. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be responsible about it now. I'm going to moderate my drinking. And so they'll start drinking again. Do Lewis, Liz, or any of you have any thoughts about that, about the return to use? What we've seen happen?
Got anything?
Go ahead, Liz, you got this one.
I think that this is a really hard one, right? Like, and I think that it's really hard for like young people, right? Because in their minds, everyone else is doing this, right? And it's like, okay, like if I go to treatment and I like slow it down, I can learn how to drink responsibly, right? There's like all these like myths that we have, right? And we were talking a little bit about this earlier, right? Like that idea of like wanting to be able to figure out how to drink normally, right? Because like the thing is that like these substances are the things that are helping that like your kid believes is helping, right? Like this is the only thing that's helping me. Why are you trying to take this away from me? Right. And so the idea of this thing that has been like so important to them and like life-saving, right, not being there anymore is a really hard concept to wrap around, right? So the idea of like, well, I won't drink anymore, but I'll still smoke pot because pot's legal and it's medical and it can help with anxiety and like all of these different things are really confusing things for kids to wrap their heads around. The reality that people slowly have to come to is that once that flip gets switched, the likelihood of being able to like successfully use these substances again is really low. But again, it's something that the person struggling with substance abuse needs to come to on their own. And like, we can't force anyone to like believe that. So, I mean, the idea of there being like a relapse or like a one-time thing or like the experimentation, that's when like the boundaries come in, right? That Kim's talking about, where it's like, my kid could have kept going, but I couldn't do it anymore. And so it's like, if this is what you're going to do, good luck. When you want to change or like change the behavior, or you need help, or you want to do it differently, we're here for you. But like, I'm not going to engage with you while you're trying to do it this way, because I won't enable you to keep hurting yourself.
I think I agree with everything Liz mentioned, and I think what's really important in that instance, if your child has been through the process and wants to try again, it's really important to ask why they want to try again. And the answer may be, all of my friends are doing it. And that's one thing. But, you know, I mentioned, I just had wished someone asked me if I was okay. And asking if I'm okay and saying, hey, buddy, are you drinking too much, are two very different questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I had plenty of people, including my father, hey, do you think you're drinking too much? Obviously, the answer is always no. Are you okay? The answer is probably always yes. But what's important, I think, are these follow-up questions. Like I said, when I mentioned my parents' divorce, how are you doing with divorce? How are you doing with that math class? I know that was really tough for you. Like, asking questions that you can figure out how they're actually dealing with things. Because if the only reason they want to go back to drinking is to use it as a crutch, obviously there's better ways to deal with that. And if the reason is solely that they want, it's because what their friends are doing, you know, I would encourage, there is a ton of things that happen in communities surrounding young people in recovery. There's a ton of events happening. I've built a very strong recovery network with people around my age and young people, and kind of showing them that pathway as well, that, hey, there's still ways to have fun. Why don't we at least try this first before you go back down that path? I think are both important things.
Louis, what do you think about, you know, people often say like there's a lot of walking on eggshells with when a loved one, or I mentioned the elephant in the room and all that. So when a loved one is drinking alcoholically, how do you feel about having it brought to your attention? You know, so I heard somebody say one time, everybody says like, you know, they don't want to poke the bear, they don't want to rock, you know, they don't want to pick a fight or whatever. So they didn't really ask the question or bring up the concern. And that, but then it was like the 10th time that month that somebody said, I'm really worried about you drinking. It was like, okay, I get it. You know, like, so where do you land on that? Like, I know you said that if somebody asked you, do you think you're drinking too much? You would have said no, but that's asking you a question. What about somebody expressing a concern?
Yeah, I think sitting down, finding the right time and place, and having a very direct conversation is always, you're going to have your best chance. So I can give you a very specific example. I mentioned I work with my dad. We both ended up on the elevator one morning, and he kind of gave me like a, whoa, new cologne. And I was like, what? And he was like he was insinuating that I smelled like liquor, right? So that's kind of like what I call like an in-passing intervention type deal. And I had a million of those. But all I did in those instances was get defensive. I think I would probably still push back, but been a lot more receptive to, you know, Liz talked about the Tuesday night dinners are time for tough conversations, and, you know, using those times or other times where you kind of pull your loved one aside, express your concerns and see how they react to that is much better than, you know, I agree. I think if you're doing those one-offs, you are poking the bear and you're opening yourself up for retaliation. But if you sit down and have a direct conversation, I've always found that people have been much more receptive to that.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions come in. So what do you all think about Karen Treatment Center dropping their under 18 population? So Karen Treatment Center is a rehab here in Pennsylvania, and they had been for many years serving an adolescent population, and they just recently made the announcement that they're going to be dropping that population so that they'll only be serving inpatient, those 18 and older. So does anyone care to share some thoughts about that?
I mean, personally, I'm like devastated, right? And like really respect the decision that they made, right? As an adolescent therapist, I think that, like 2 weeks ago, there were 3 places that I would even send a teenager for treatment, right? And like now there's 2, right? That being said, right, the level of mental health that is going on with these teenagers is so beyond an addiction, like education treatment program, right? And so a lot of times what's happening is we're sending these adolescents up to a 30-day residential program, like for me as a therapist, to sober them up so I can even assess what the mental health is underlying. And, Karen, like very plainly was like, this is not, like the treatment program that we're doing is not getting the results that we want. And so we're going to close it down and look at it. And looking at their model and seeing if that worked for them, it didn't, right? And like Karen's like, like I went through their care and adolescent program, right? Like I love that program, but the idea that like Karen is a program that will like look at themselves and be like, hey, we're no longer appropriate to be doing this like mental health treatment for adolescents, and saying that and shutting it down and focusing on what they do so well. I have a lot of respect for, because that's not how a lot of treatment programs work. So it's a loss for sure, but I respect that that's the kind of treatment program they are.
Thanks, Liz. Louis, any?
I agree 100% with what Liz says. I'm not a clinician, but from those that I talk to, I've heard the same thing, that in adolescence, it's most often severe mental health disguising itself to substance abuse. And there are still some really great programs out there. And if you call Karen Admissions, I know that they'll send you to them. But I agree with Liz. I mean, amazing on Karen for looking at themselves and saying, we're going to shut this down until we can find a way to directly and correctly support these adolescents.
Yeah, in a perfect world, we would have so many more options for adolescents. It just, my worry has always been, regardless of this announcement, it's always been that there just are not enough options for adolescents, and I think you're so right that it is mental health, right? I mean, why is a 15-year-old getting high every day or drinking every day? There's something going on. And maybe if we can learn what's really underneath it, we can circumvent it. And perhaps they don't have a lifelong addiction and they don't have to abstain for life. Definitely abstain until you have some maturity and your brain has a better chance to develop and all that sort of thing. But it's not just about the substances, right? So yeah, it is rather complex, but it's unfortunate that so often if the use continues, then you have probably a full-blown addiction on your hands once they're over 18, over 21, and it's just can be so much more complex to treat both, so it's just a shame that we don't have more support with insurance and things like that to really get at those underlying causes, especially for adolescents. So it's yeah, I'm right there with you. Devastating, but it is definitely challenging. So I believe this is for you, Liz. How do you think this is the best way to build rapport with your clients?
I'm not the parent, right? Like they're not coming to me to get into trouble, right? So usually, like I can ask them questions. I let them play around. I give them some space, right? Like my adolescent group is like very skill building, but also a lot of space for them to be able to be honest. And talk with each other, right? Like I go over HIPAA, I go over what I will tell their parents, like, and you know, what I won't tell their parents, and allowing them the space, right? And again, you know, for me, like I'm like concerned if they're drinking 10 beers a night, right? Or if they have like a plan to hurt themselves. But like outside of those things, right, I'm looking for why that's happening. And so I'm not really getting caught up in those things, right? Also, I mean, the best way to build rapport with them is to like do a family session and kind of get you parents to like, you know, give in a little bit to something, because then they really know I'm on their side and I can work with them better. But I mean, that's really like what my intention is. My intention is to just go in with these kids and kind of give them a space, because like they're getting in trouble at school, they're getting in trouble at home. Their mental health has like gone to crap, and like sometimes they just need a space to be like angry teenagers, and like that be okay. And so that's really just what I try and do.
I think that you have such a huge advantage in that you are a person in recovery, and you know, it's kind of like if you spot it, you got it sort of thing, or if you
Oh,
got
yeah.
it, you spot it, I guess in this case. Because I know or remember when my son was, he was 21 when he went to treatment and got sober. He's 34 now, but when he was 21, I can remember him being inpatient and sitting in his counselor's office while he was still inpatient, and his dad and I were in there, and the counselor was asking him, you know, so what are you most worried about when you leave treatment? And he said, well, you know, everybody gets high, so I'm just worried about that. And his counselor was like, actually, everybody doesn't get high. You just chose to be with those people. And my son was like, oh yeah, I guess that's true. Do you know how many times I said those exact words to my son? And it was like, that's not true, mom. Everybody does, you know. And all he needed was somebody who was really almost a peer, you know. I mean, he had a good 10, 12 years on him, but you know, he definitely listened to him more than his mom or dad, you know, because we're mom and dad. And they see us, you know, especially when we're getting in the way of their substance use, as you know, we're just in the way, we're just a barrier, you know. Oh, you know, you think the sky is falling all the time, get out of my way, you know. So it's just I think it's so helpful to allow your children the opportunity to be with a clinician. I mean, it just, and please don't hesitate to take your loved one to a clinician who understands addiction.
Mhm.
We have a story. I know so many other parents who have a story of taking your child to somebody who doesn't understand addiction, and they miss so much. They're perfectly good for their field, you know, mood and anxiety disorders. That's where it's the route that we went. She didn't get it. He completely snowed her. And I wish that we had the courage to say this might be an addiction and really pursue that specialist. And so I really encourage people to consider that.
And to be fair, like that's my job 90% of the time, right? My job is like kids lying to me and them coming in 6 months later with like some grand idea I told them like in an assessment, but like they're also young, right? And so they're not gonna like mold into like the perfect treatment plan at the end of 90 days. And so I feel like there's also like a lot of space for them to, you know, be kids and like have those like bumps in the road to like be able to figure it out for themselves.
Right. Here's another question. Teens are going to experiment with alcohol. So how can we allow that safely or not allow it at all? I will challenge that right off the bat and say, not all kids experiment, not all. You know, I know that, again, much like our kids want to tell us that everybody does this, that's the perception, right? That's that social norm that's out there that like, oh, everybody does this. Our kids want us to believe that. They want to believe it. They want to be validated in their need to try a substance or their desire to try a substance. So not all do, but okay. So on to the rest of the question. How can we allow that safely or not allow it at all?
I don't really know that you can allow it safely, to be honest with you, at least in my case. So let me speak to my personal experience. If my parents said, I don't know, you can have some friends over and drink tonight, like I just don't think there was anything safe about it. Like if I was going to have a beer myself, I was going to have 10. And if I was going to have 10, I was going to have 20. And like it didn't matter whether you allowed me to safely or not. So I think like it's a slippery slope, I guess I would say in my personal experience.
If we think about how vulnerable that developing brain is, you know, just to remember the fact that, and I often share this in my presentations when we're talking to parents in school districts, is to think of the brain as wet cement. It's very malleable, it's very vulnerable. And if at a very early age, they're using a substance for social activities, for challenges, for you know, there are a million reasons. I can't sleep, I can't concentrate, I can't focus. I'm talking about other kind of substances too, but any of that we introduce something to our still developing brain, we're kind of shutting off the opportunity for a healthy connection to some way to cope, or some way to socialize, or some way to do this without a substance. So I don't want to be complicit in that, is kind of how I look at it. You know, I don't want to be the one opening the door to that, because even though we might say, oh, but you make sure you don't drive, or you make sure, you know, you don't drink more than these 3 beers or whatever it is. That's not what they're hearing. They're hearing, I'm okay with it, you know, and that worries me.
And yeah, like that's, I think that at least the kids that end up like in my office, right? That's, I think, one of the hardest things to break through with kids, because I work with a lot of parents that when they come in are like, well, my kid, you know, when we have family parties, he can have a drink or two, or like, you know, at like Thanksgiving, like we'll let him have like a glass of wine or something like that. And what kids hear is, I can drink, right? Or I can do this, or it's okay, right? And so again, right, like the idea of like setting like a very clear line, right? Because as soon as we kind of were like, but A, and then also B, and, you know, like we kind of like, it gets a little bit more gray, then they'll run off, right? It's like when parents aren't on the same page with stuff, like kids get away with everything because there's no clear line. So being able to like say that no, but then also having the space where if that is something that's going on, like kids can come and be honest, but like being like, dude, like this is not allowed. Like what happened? Like, why is this how is this how we got here? You know?
Mm-hmm. I often also hear parents say like, well, in Europe, they let kids drink really young. And well, you know, unfortunately, Europe has extremely high rates of alcoholism. It does not mean that it's okay and helpful, you know, so not a great reason to do that. So one last question, if we can. I sit with kids every day who say, no one ever asked me if I'm okay. How can we support parents through this process when they're dealing with their own issues? So they're having their own strife and challenges in life. And, you know, I think parents, we do get, you know, the fingers wagged at us quite a lot that we miss things. And I was wagging at my own self, like, how did I miss this? Yeah, life is hard for us, regardless of our age. Even when we're parents, doesn't mean we're going to be the best at everything that we do. So how can we best support parents? I know what I want to say is go to support group meetings. We need each other through this stuff, really. But anyone else have any thoughts about this?
It's a family system, right? So like your kid is not just like the problem. You are not just the problem, right? It's like how everybody's working together. And so I have so many times that kids come in and I do the parent group on Tuesday nights, and like I wish I could swap it, right? I wish I could have like these kids come in and like watch a movie or something with me on Tuesday night and then like work with you guys so much more, because you guys need that support too. So like get your own people. That's it. Just you need to also have your own support too.
I think being very open, if you're able, and share your own experiences with your child. I can tell you that throughout my treatment process, my parents really opened up to me about their struggles in their relationship and how they sought out a lot of marital counseling before their divorce and went through a lot of work prior to taking that step. And that really helped me understand, and it helped me open up to them, because we're I'm a parent now too. It's crazy, but like, my dad's my superhero. Nothing's ever wrong. So like hearing him say he had some challenges, it makes him human and allows me to open up to him.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you. We are at 8:31, so I'm going to thank you all so very much. Thanks for being with us, everyone, and thank you to our amazing panel, Ed, Liz, and Lewis. I so appreciate you being with us. This recording will be available by the morning. It'll be on that follow-up page. I just put it in the chat again, conversation.zone/alcohol. Thanks, everybody. This is great.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, great.
Everyone.
Thank you.